Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another program of Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. I appreciate you joining us on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon here in mid-June. It's Tuesday, June 18th. If you're watching live. And so please feel free to call in if you have any questions or comments or things you'd like to discuss or whatever. You're always welcome. The phone number is 640-3091, and don't be shy, nobody bites. So I'd be very happy to hear from you if you have issues concerning Manchester's schools or education more broadly that you're interested in bringing to the public. So here we are, a couple of days into school vacation. I think teachers, students finished on Thursday, and then teachers finished yesterday afternoon. And I have to tell you that one of the things that happens that most of us don't see or really realize, or at least don't take enough notice of, is that every year when we get to this stage of the year, teachers retire, and in other companies, people retire at various times of the year. So there isn't if you're in a private company, if you're working down at Fidelity in Merrimack or at Edgewater Technology in the Mills or wherever, anywhere, it's not as though people say, "Oh, it's coming up for the 28th of February. I wonder who's retiring this year." The school system's a little different than that because obviously operating on the school year, teachers and other staff are likely to or do retire at a certain time. So at the end of every school year in every school, there are some people saying goodbye. Now, the positive is that there are new people coming in all the time, and that's great too. But I just want to single out somebody who, and I know there are many others who may be retiring this year, and I saw a list from some of the other schools, but I wanted to make a special mention of a very wonderful man who has been at Hillside Middle School for decades, and that's Mr. Bill Dupere. And Bill has been, the first time I ever entered Hillside Middle School back, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, I met with, the first person I met was Bill Dupere, and, he wasn't the first person I met, but the first person I made real contact with, and he was the one who took me on the guided tour, so to speak, of the school. And like any parent, with my kids coming out of grade school for the first time, heading into middle school, I was filled with anxiety and worry and lots of questions. And my little, to me, what were babies then, were starting to grow up, and I'm thinking of my little daughter heading into middle school, into the big bad world, so to speak. And so little did I know, when walking the hills of Hillside back then, what the ensuing years would bring, and that I would spend a lot of time over those years walking those corridors often myself, and seeing the extraordinary work that goes on there every day and every year, and the great kids that are there and the great staff. And that eventually led me to seeing the kind of work that's going on in our district, and when I look at the different personalities of the different schools, grade schools, high schools, middle schools, it's extraordinary. So I did drop in to see Mr. Dupere this week, just to wish him well, and for him and for all the other teachers, the ones that I am not naming here because I'm less prepared than I should be for these things, thank you to all of you for the wonderful, wonderful work that you've done and all the lives that you have touched. As I said to Mr. Dupere when I spoke to him on Thursday, I think it was, or Friday maybe, the countless people that he has touched over his years there, all the problems he has dealt with, both little and large, and in all the years I saw him there, I've never seen him in any other mode than often very busy, often flying around, but always with time for a word and always with a smile on his face. And so he's not alone, but he's an exemplar, an example of some of the wonderful people we have in our school district. And I wish him well. And I wish all those others retiring well also. And then that brings me to the issue of the teachers' non-contract. Not alone the teachers, but the principals, the secretarial staff, the support staff, all the people working in the Manchester School District who've gone without a contract. The teachers for more than a year now, and as I've said previously, and many of you know, they've been out of a contract more than in a contract over the last 6 or 7 years. I think 3 of the last 6 years they've actually had a contract. And we discussed last week the meaning of all of that. So, shame on us, shame on the city, shame on our public representatives. I would, of course, note that we did have a vote at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen last week where they did indeed override the terrible tax cap and found some additional money in order to see if they could actually give a contract to the teachers and other staff in our schools. The problem is a serious one. We have people. The numbers of people leaving and the rate at which they're leaving is now greater than it was before. Perhaps we'll see people like those I mentioned earlier who are retiring at the end of a career. Sadly, in our schools today, we've seen people leaving, and not at retirement, but leaving because of the disparity in opportunity between the city of Manchester and opportunities in surrounding towns. And that's another line we have crossed that we should never have crossed. It's taken us a long time to get there, but anybody watching at home who voted for or was a member of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for the last 10 years, or maybe even 15, but certainly for the last 10, or if you are a current or a previous board member of the school board or Board of Mayor and Aldermen, those of you who tried hard, those of you who did some little thing, and those of you who did nothing, harsh words perhaps, but did nothing to fix the school, the issues with our schools, then you own this, the good and the bad. And so it was pointed out to me by a man who never ceases to sort of bring me up on things and take me to task perhaps. But I've often talked in the past about the fact that at Manchester's schools that we haven't built a new school since 1997. That which is now 20 some years ago. And we have, of our 20-some schools, in order to just maintain them, so that they don't, the oldest ones, they won't. Let me rephrase that, so that we won't end up with all our schools being 100+ years old. We would need to start building new schools in Manchester and build one every 4 years. And so we could get 25 schools built over a period of 100 years. And in 100 years from now, we would eventually have caught up with where we would need to be, just to give you an order of magnitude. In the case of the tax cap, I talked to a number of aldermen in the advent of that vote. Some of them said to me, things went well last week, didn't they, Jim? You must be pleased. And I have to tell you, I hate to be a mealy mouth, and I don't want to be a mealy mouth, because I recognise that coming at it from the point of view of some members of the Board, Mayor and Aldermen, they look at it as they took extraordinary, in their view, steps. That they took they took a deep breath and actually overrode the tax cap, and so this, what will eventually be $6.1 million, is seen by them as a huge risk, sort of, not risk, maybe a huge step, and in fact it isn't. So Mayor Craig rightfully will talk about the fact that her increase allowed under the tax cap, because inflation averaged out over the last 3 years, ended up being 2.16 or 2.2% this past year, and therefore the within the tax cap was allowed a 2.2% increase. Well, that 2.2% increase ended up being $3 million, and that's what the school district and the city needed just in order to tread water, just to retain the programs that they have in place right now. And then we had 2,000 employees, who some of whom who haven't had a contract for over a year, and they're handing in their notices left, right, and centre into schools around the district. So guess what? The Board of Mayor and Aldermen had to stand up and actually put the additional $2.1 million or $2.2 million into the budget. And as I've said before, those who want to be congratulating themselves, as I've said before, just do the math. With 2,100 employees in the state, in the city, in the school district, if each of them were to get $1,000 a year increase, which is $20 a week, 50 cents an hour. So a 50 cents an hour increase for our employees in our school district would bring them would cost the city $2.1 or $2.2 million. So effectively, with all the brouhaha and all the excitement, and those who have spoken to me or called me, or those who I've met at other events in the last week or two since that was done, who've said, didn't we do a great thing? I said to them, well, thank you very much. I do know from your worldview you think you did a great thing. From my worldview, tell me, what have you done about the kids in the city of Manchester who don't have the programs that they need? Not the ones that they'd like to have, not the ones that they actually deserve, not the ones that they are required to have under the state constitution of New Hampshire, that the state of New Hampshire should be supplying an adequate education. And it clearly, by anybody's rights, is not doing so. So, as a public representative, you just own that. And if there are kids in school in Manchester and there are kids with autism or special needs kids or blind children or deaf children or hard of hearing children with emotional difficulties, children with, and whatever they may need, when they're sitting there looking at, if we could get this into a one-to-one with the people of Manchester, where they could walk into a room and see kids, and I've talked about just kids with some additional needs, but just the everyday kids in our city who are sitting there, and if we could ever have a walk by, if we could drag in each voter into a room and just show them and say, these are the children, look at them, they're young, they're beautiful, they're ambitious, they deserve better, they need our help, and we should be able to do it. And most people in Manchester, it's a place that I've lived now for 25 years, 26 years, and I meet nice and wonderful people all day long who are kind and generous of heart. I don't understand how that doesn't get translated into voting. When it comes to voting for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and for the school board, that people will vote people into office who know the extent of the problem and refuse to do anything about it. There is some excuse for the voter who is at home, who hasn't devoted inordinate amounts of time to studying the school district and knowing what the problems are. There's some excuse for them. For people who go and serve on the Board of School Committee, who know what the extent of the problems are and what the needs of our school district are, for them there's really no place to hide. They, despite knowing that our city's kids are the least well-funded school kids in the state of New Hampshire, they know, because they see it every day, or should if they ever bother to visit the schools, they know that we have the most We have the least number of teachers per student of any town in the state of New Hampshire. And they know that despite those two salient and important and amazing facts, that the population of students in the city of Manchester is more needy than the average population of students across the state. And despite all of that, this is what we get. And then there's a special place in my thoughts for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And lots of, I meet them all the time, and many of them I like. They're decent people. The disconnect though in Manchester, even the most reasonable of people on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, mostly have no idea about what's happening in the schools. As was pointed out to me by the gentleman I began to speak about earlier, who's often brought me up and made me think about things differently, he said to me this week about the fact that, when was the last time, what has happened for the schools in terms of maintenance or repair, etc. And, he said that the last buildings, we had a new police station built in Manchester since the last school was built. We had a new municipal centre built in Manchester, which I think everybody would agree was an important achievement. And if I were to look back at the mayor, at Mayor Gats's tenure, I would think that would probably be perhaps the number one achievement of his during those terms, to get a municipal centre built where the various repair facilities, etc., were all consolidated into one, and certainly there have been savings as a result of that. But during all that time, nothing has happened. Nothing has happened with schools. And the gentleman I'm talking about said to me, "And I bet we'll have a new central fire station built before we get a new school." So a new municipal centre, a new police station. Part of the municipal centre was the Parks and Rec, a new Parks and Rec building, etc., etc. And his point was, I'd take a bet right now that there'll be a new central fire station built before they ever think of building a school in Manchester. And that's a frightening thought, really. And we had a longer discussion about the issue of where Manchester is going and what its future is, etc. And there are people who are all over the spectrum with regard to their hopes and dreams for Manchester's future. I am in the seat of expecting Manchester to be recognizing the growth that's happening in the city, and expecting it to be a place that will be attractive for young families and the parents of young children to come and live in, and that can only happen if we spend money in our schools. So. Thank you to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for their override of the tax cap. We're $50 million behind where we need to be in the school district. $50 million number comes from we need $50 million in order to extra every year in order that the Manchester School District would have the same amount of money to spend per student as the average school district in the state, not the richest school districts in the state, not the nicest towns in the state, not the bells and whistles, gold doorknobs schools in the state, not the schools of the rich and wealthy in the fabulous towns scattered around New Hampshire average number. No, the average number of all the towns in the state of New Hampshire, places like Claremont and Berlin and Keene and Walpole and up and down the Monadnock region and over to the seacoast and up into Coos County and all the places in the state that are, many of which, not all of that list is like that, but many parts of the state of New Hampshire, Cheshire County, Coos County, there are places where there's a lot less economic vibrancy than there is in the city of Manchester. So when Manchester is the least well-funded school district in the state, in a state like New Hampshire, that says a heck of a lot. if we were saying that Manchester was less well funded than Portsmouth, Nashua, and Concord, you'd say, well, maybe, maybe we don't have ambitions like those people have, and maybe we're happy to be, what do we call ourselves, a gritty city. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that we are the least well-funded school district in the state. So we're going on for another year. Hopefully our teachers will actually see some benefit from this money that has been passed. There are meetings. I believe there's a special school board meeting tomorrow night, Wednesday night, and another one next week. So I'm presuming that things are coming to the fore. I did have a look at. I heard it mentioned at the school board meeting last night that there were 90 positions open in the school district as of last night. Now think about it. So that's the middle of June. We have 90 positions open, and we're trying to hire staff. Most school districts in the state of New Hampshire have hired their staff long ago. The kids coming out of college who were looking for jobs, all the top kids from the top colleges, they weren't going to wait around to see what the city of Manchester might have left to offer, if anything, because it could just as be likely that the city of Manchester might end up pink-slipping a bunch of people or deciding to downsize again and have no hirings going on at all. So, nobody's going to wait around for a hiring process starting in mid-June, which is what we're doing. And now we'll see, of course, and I don't mean any slight towards the people who may apply for jobs in our district. I would encourage people to. I think there's wonderful work here to be done. But let's not con ourselves. If you're a bright, sassy, intelligent, well-trained, sought-after teacher, especially in the STEM area, for instance, but across all areas, and you've been snapped up. When you were going to interviews back in March and April, you've been snapped up. You have your job. You're starting. I think about the kids who graduated out of our high schools 4 years ago who have gone into the teaching profession. And I know a bunch of them, or the few that I know that are in the teaching piece at least, but they all had their jobs wrapped up. They all know. When I talk to my daughter about where her friends are going to be, she'll say, this girl is going to be teaching in Poughkeepsie, and this girl is teaching in Salem, and this girl is teaching somewhere outside Boston, and this other girl's girl. It happens to be girls because lots of her friends are girls, but these, those numbers were all known months ago. And here we are, Manchester, coming out with looking for positions. But I looked on here, and if I could find it, let me see. I had it here. Just give me 1 second here. I had it a minute ago, of course, from the MANSD website, the Manchester website as of today. So administration, non-certified, 5 open positions. Administration with certificate, 4 openings. Adult education, 1. Athletics, 16. Elementary school teachers, 25. We've got 25 job openings right now for elementary school teachers. Come on up, line up and apply. Maybe you actually will be paid to work, and maybe the contract that you sign when you are welcomed into the school district will be worth the paper it's written on, and maybe the 14 people plus the mayor who are sitting around at the board meeting in 3 years from now, who this year are saying, come into our wonderful city, come teach for us, come be part of the solution in Manchester, and by the way, here's our program. We pay you this, we give you steps over time, we pay you little at the start, but if you stay with us, we'll give you more money over time. Hopefully they'll actually blush in 3 years from now when you walk in as now a 3-year long teacher who's come to work every day and done your job and given more than you ever thought you would, and there isn't even an apology from City Hall. There isn't even a blush. It's like, well, that's the way it is, and what can we do? We have a tax cap, and, well, sorry, you probably wouldn't even get the sorry. So, high school teachers, 2. We have 2. We're downsizing the high schools, of course, so we have teachers being eliminated from high schools again this year. Middle schools, we have 18 open positions in middle schools tonight. There are 4 school department support jobs. There are 2 in the food and nutrition services. Student support services teachers, there's 24 teachers in student support services. We have 1 substitute position, 2 summer school and 37 support staff. So I do a quick math and that gets me 50 and 37 at 87 and 90 and 18, 108. There's a lot more than 90. I'm getting 108, 124. Quick math, 134. I think I just got a quick math about 135 jobs open in the district right now. So go out and hire them, folks. Let's see what we can. Let's do our best. This is Manchester's finest. This is our political format. This is how we operate, and it's just all very depressing. So hopefully, despite all these challenges, I just know I heard of some new hires going on. It's like I'm spinning in the wind here because I talked to some people who told me they were starting in the Manchester School District. They were moving to new positions in the Manchester School District, and I'm very excited at the upgrades of some of those people that they're in going into positions that they're really looking forward to, and that's because those positions are becoming vacant. And so for people who are capable, who are within the system, who want to move forward, it's like in the military. There's sometimes there are bottlenecks, and you have to wait for the person above you to retire or move to another position before that position comes open for you. So I guess an ill wind, right, blows some good, etc. So that's the number of teachers posted to as of today in the city of Manchester. I wanted to talk about something else, something more positive. I mentioned the last couple of weeks about the issue, the one that was very close to Dr. Vargas's heart, the issue of reading. And he said when he came to the district 3 years ago that one of the things he'd like to do is to see every kid in the city of Manchester schools be in possession of a City of Manchester library card. I don't know how far down that path he got, but certainly the reinstitution of the bookmobile was a wonderful thing, and so we have the bookmobile back in Manchester this summer. If you go to the MANSD website, there are a bunch of things on this page about the summer learning program, or the summer reading program. But the schedule for the bookmobile is, let me see. So on Mondays, on Mondays, the bookmobile will be starting in July 8th, 16th, 22nd, and 29th. So these dates are in July, run through to the first week of August. They end up in August 6th, 7th, 8th. That's the last week of this. But from the 1st of June through, on Mondays at Livingston Park, the bookmobile will be there, and then in the afternoon it'll be at Elmwood Gardens from 1 to 2. Just a second, we've got an incoming call. Hi, caller, go ahead. Hello.
How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good. This is Phil.
Hey, Phil. How are you?
I'm all right, man. I just put your show on. I'm in the middle of cooking dinner outside.
Okay.
I hope I don't step on anyone's toes or interject something that's already been gone over, but do you mind if I take 2 minutes to clarify something?
Please, go ahead.
All right. It has to do with the teacher's contract, and I don't want to get into the pros and cons of it or a discussion. I just want to see if I can attempt to set the record straight, at least as far as I know what's going on.
Okay.
I might not have all the information. I'm pretty sure I do, but I want to have a little caveat in case I make a mistake. So do you mind if I go ahead and do that?
No, please go ahead and do that. You're very welcome.
All right, so there's been some discussion about the steps in the new contract proposal and whether or not it makes people whole, and if you missed a step, you're going to get a step, or if you miss 2, you're going to get 2, so you're not going to lose money. And we're going to bring everybody up to speed. Is that pretty much your understanding of it?
I've got a grayed out understanding. I don't have a great understanding, but it sounds like what I've been listening to what the school board has been saying, and that's what I've heard from them.
if we took that as fact, here's what I'd like to do, and I don't want to be debating it and whether or not we should accept it or not accept it, or if the money's there or it's not there. Just for clarity's purposes only. The fact that people are behind on steps, it's a state law that if you're out of contract, the district does not have to honor your steps. So I give the district that. We're out of contract, you don't have to honor our contract. That would pertain to the last time we were in contract negotiations, not this time. So we ended up signing a new contract. People did not get their steps. We were out of contract. We were at least half at fault for that because we didn't sign a contract, so those steps are gone. Keeping that in mind, we redid the salary scale. So now we have a redone salary scale. Now when this happens again, we still don't have a contract second time around. But the difference is the district not only did not fund money for raises, I'll give them that, we'll put that aside, that's not up for debate, they have a right to do that. But they also did not fund the step increases that were promised to us. Now if you go back in history, even before Evergreen was outlawed, the district had honored steps, even when they didn't have to, just to be amicable and to respect teachers. But they still don't have to do that by law, and I get that. But once they fund a budget, and the aldermen were part and parcel to it, that not only didn't fund raises, but didn't even fund steps that were already promised to us, to me that's willful negligence, and if I was a union official still, to me that would be an unfair labor practice. But
right.
Put all that aside. Now, I've already made that point. The fact that they say if you're on step, and I'm making up the numbers, but if you're on step 7, so if you sign this contract, we'll put you on step 9, and you won't lose any steps. Well, number-wise, you won't. But if you look at the steps as a ladder, in the old days it used to be 14. I forget what it went to because I didn't want to pay attention to it because I knew it wasn't a good deal. It was elongated. Now they want to elongate it again. So although you'll still be on the, you'll be put on the right step, you're not on the same ladder.
Right.
So you have more rungs to go before you get to the top.
Right.
And not only that, you weren't paid for the steps that you missed. So it's non-debatable that you're not made whole because you're not making up the money you already lost, which is fine. Put that aside. But to say you're on step 9, just like you would have been had you been under a contract, is disingenuous at best. It's misinformation.
Right.
Although the number's the same, it's not the same rung on the ladder because the ladder has changed, and they don't say that. So I'm trying to do my best to get the word out that although they're not incorrect in what they're saying, had we had a contract, you'd be on step 9, and if we sign this one, you'll still be on step 9.
Right.
That's true. But step 9 doesn't mean what it used to mean.
Yep.
And what they tell you is, but you'll be making more money, and that's true too. But why wouldn't you? We're 2 or 3 years away, out.
Right.
Of course you're going to be making more money. What they don't tell you is you won't be making what you should have been making or you could have been making under the redone contract.
Right.
You certainly won't be making what you would have been making under the steps of the original step scale.
And what
I think that's the missing piece.
Right.
People start to get confused and back and forth and public debate, and then the school board tries to correct people that speak. And again, I'm not weighing in on whether what's right, wrong, or indifferent. All I'm saying is let's get the full story out there.
Right.
And I appreciate you being on TV to allow me to do that.
Thank you, Phil. It's I appreciate you doing that. But before you go, and earlier tonight, before you turned on, I was talking about the fact that we have I counted about 135 or something open recs in the district right now. Like lots of open teaching positions, etc. And I was talking about the kids who graduated college this year who were becoming teachers. And my daughter's friends who were going into teaching, they all all knew where they were going to go teaching and where they had jobs. And some were down in Rhode Island, and some were in Massachusetts, and some were in southern New Hampshire, and they're starting in various places. They knew where they were going in March and April. They're coming out of college and saying, "Oh, I'm starting in Salem High School on the 1st of September." We're turning around in mid-June, and we've got all these open recs. But to your point, I was pointing out to watchers earlier on that we're now looking for young people, if we can find bright and smart young people willing to come in and teach in our district, and we're going to do a deal with them. And part of the deal will be, when they're measuring whether they want to come or not, they look at the offer, and the offer will say, as a first-year teacher, I'm going to get $36,000 a year, but I'm going to get a step in year 1 and year 2 and year 3. And they think to themselves, well, by the time I'm 28, I'm going to be on step 5, and I'll be earning this amount, and maybe I'll be able to afford a nice car, or afford to get married or something. And I pointed out earlier before you came on that, the city of Manchester has no problem with signing that contract, attracting that young person into the city, filling them full of garbage about, we love you and trust you and come on in. And then they won't even blush or say sorry after 3 years when they abandon all of that and say, oopsie daisy, we just decided not to fund it. So I agree with you 100%. That's what I was talking about before you came on.
Well, I'm sorry I missed it. Very well
that's
put.
That's all right, but it is all wrong. But the problem is the people, when they're married to this. First of all, they're ideologically bent. When I see some of the stuff being said, I don't like to get into this, but I just want to mention it briefly because other steps were taken in the last 2 weeks. I saw people, having things on social media talking about teachers and educators and calling them names and etc. And when people like that are involved, they want to come in then and supposedly be in good faith sitting around the table to represent the city of Manchester in negotiations with the teachers after being out on social media calling them names and deriding them and etc. I mean, that's just incredible to me. But anyway,
I'm glad I'm not on social media, but
yeah,
to that point, I think last night's school board meeting spoke volumes, and there have been some comments made that nobody leaves the district, and that used to be true.
Right.
But that's not true anymore.
No.
But not only forget about leaving it. How about the people that had stayed? Last night they honored teachers, support staff, administrative staff, administrators, paraprofessionals, and I didn't count, but there was at least, or I shouldn't say at least, there was about 40 names called.
Right.
To get their certificate for years of service. And you know how many teachers showed up?
How many?
4.
Wow.
So if that doesn't speak volumes about how the educational staff, not just teachers,
right,
but everybody involved, feels about the school board. When the school board invites them to be honored, and they're going to get a certificate honoring their service, now I'm sure some of them had other commitments and all that,
right,
but there's no way anybody could make a reasonable argument that when 4 people out of a huge number of people, and I forget what the number was, doesn't show up. That speaks volumes to what's going on and how people feel about those that are governing.
But I got to tell you,
that they didn't show up.
Yeah, if you were,
and I'm not picking on the ones that showed up.
Right. No, I know.
They had storied careers. They did great things. They had every right to go, and I honor their service and their commitment.
Right. But Phil,
you can't turn your head or a blind eye to the fact that almost nobody showed up.
Right. Phil, you and I know that if you were a little league coach or a basketball coach or a football coach or, God forbid, a soccer coach like I was once, if at the end of the season you have your teams and you're announcing, the various awards for, best service and most athletic kid or whatever the things are, and you have a big brouhaha about you're going to hand out your kudos for the end of the season, and none of the kids show up. It tells you one thing and one thing only. It tells you that you suck as a coach. And you might have had a great year standing on the sideline shouting and screaming at people, but guess what? The kids are voting with their feet. They don't want to come by and get a lousy certificate from you. And that's the same thing here. If teachers felt as though they were honored and cared for and respected, they'd be there and be delighted to get our gratitude and claps on the back. But they know exactly what they're dealing with. You can't be out on speaking out of one side of your mouth about how about educrats and the public school system is trying to, whatever, indoctrinate our kids, etc., etc. And then on the other side, sit on a school board and expect them to smile back at you. So anyway, Phil, I appreciate the call. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
I'll see you, man. Good luck. Bye. All right. So there you go. That is Phil Sapienza talking about the contract issue, and these, it is what it is, and even the best intentioned people, the problem is, and when it comes to negotiations from the school board, I heard. The previous I mentioned last week about Dr. Avard, who's about to retire after his years of service on the school board. He was one of the principal, maybe the principal negotiator of a contract 4 years ago. And, he said at the time, he said a couple of weeks ago that, he went into those negotiations and he did what he'd been asked to do by the school board, and which was to negotiate a contract under the terms of the tax cap, and that becomes the red line. And he said at that meeting, to my surprise, he said that the tax cap had been a problem in the city of Manchester, and it had done damage to the city of Manchester. And I forget the exact words he said, but he was quite strong about it. He didn't say that he disliked it and maybe we should relook at it. He said the tax cap was a problem that it had a deteriorating effect on the Manchester School District. And so the current group of people who's negotiating on behalf of the city are in exactly the same position. They have an artificial line in the sand, and they say, that's what we're only entitled to do. This is all we have, and so let's negotiate. And that's why you have these stupid conversations, which I think are stupid, around teachers. If you give up this benefit, the city will, as a result of that, the city will save $1.1 million. And that would be great if you could do that, and then we'll give you an increase of $1.2 million in salary. Won't that be great? And it's a nonsense. It's like it's a joke. So the only way we can fund it is from taking the money from someplace else. So, yeah, I'll give you a pay increase. Why don't you give me some money in one envelope, and then I'll take it out, put it in the new envelope called new pay increase, and I'll stick the same money in there, and I'll send the same grubby money back to you. And then I'll sit there smiling at you saying, look at me, I did a great job. I got you a pay increase. I call BS, ladies and gentlemen. It's a joke. But the good news is there are lots of new people running for school board in the city of Manchester, and God bless them. I wish them well. Things need to change. We'll see what will happen. There was some discussion last night about what's going to happen with regard to a bill working its way through the House in Concord that would get, as Pat Long put it last night, school board member at large Pat Long put it last night, that it would get the state out of our district, and by that he meant that the city would be allowed with the new charter commission, which will be seated at the end of this year, the beginning of next year, that they'd be allowed to contemplate the idea of separating the school district and making it its own authority under the charter, and putting the city on its own as well, and separating the two. That's what's been done in Concord, and it's been pretty successful in Concord. And I've always been a little agnostic about that. It didn't seem to me the most compelling need. My thought was that in the first instance that the mayor, whoever the mayor should be should not be the chair of the school board, that rather it be somebody else, that there needs to be an advocate at the top of the school district who is an advocate for our schools, our parents, our children. And so I thought that, but I've moved closer to the idea of liking it that the school board become its own authority. So I encourage people to run. And we'll see if with a lot of new faces, a lot of people are retiring, so there'll be a lot of new faces around the table. But there needs to be a shake-up. I'm hoping that perhaps Manchester Proud can be an important part of that shake-up. And to be frank, I am now part of the review committee or whatever its exact title is at Manchester Proud. I have no idea what the final proposals might be from Manchester Proud. For all I know, it could be, shut down all our schools and just have one elementary school and let's have everybody go to that. I mean, I just don't, that's ridiculous, of course, but I have no idea what the outcome will be. I don't know if I'm going to actually hate the whole thing or I'm going to love it or where I'll be on the spectrum in between those two. I just don't know. But I'm hopeful that a lot of wise people putting a lot of energy and effort into this, and with a bunch of people from the business community being part of it as well, that we may get, that may be a catalyst for change. Sometimes it worries me about some of the conversations there, but that's because, the example of that would be when people talk about utilization of space, and this bugs me more than anything else. I heard it last night. My friend Leslie Want was at the school board meeting last night. There was a discussion about rooms, the use of rooms, and it began with pre-K and special ed. They were talking about, were there classrooms that were used for part of the day and not used for other parts of the day. The implication being that we've got empty space that, could be better utilized rather than having lots of, rather than having two classes, one used in the morning and another one used in the afternoon, that should be one class. Of course, that is a fallacy mostly anyway, but the school district is looking at it. But why it's all a nonsense, in my view, is because when we eliminated 160 teachers, albeit that we ended up rehiring some and then replaced some of those positions over time. But, when we eliminate teachers, it's very easy to have overcapacity in the schools. When you have, let me put it very simply and succinctly, this is a half-minute thing. If you, as we all know, unless people are willfully denying the truth, because the truth is simple, it's factual. We can't all have our own facts. Kellyanne Conway can say there's truth and real truth and half truth and it's not full truth. There's only one truth. And we have the largest number of kids in front of every teacher in the state of New Hampshire. So historically, when we have as I said the other day, we've got 90 kids in second grade in a class at, let's say, Green Acres. In Manchester, we have 3 classes of 30. And this is not exact numbers right now, but just for illustrative purposes, we have 3 classes of 30. Whereas a few years ago, we would have had 4 classes of 22 and a half, if you could have such a thing. So we fire one teacher, we squeeze the kids into the 3 classrooms. Of course, we've got one classroom empty. And if we do that across the school district, guess what? We have 25% of our classrooms not being utilized. So I worry about the process that's going on. By the way, these are numbers being looked at when I've seen when I see reports coming in, and there's lots of data has come into Manchester Proud as it's looking at its thing. But when I see the Board of School Committee looking for information, that there's no nuance here. They look at it and say, "Oh, we've got an empty classroom over here." Of course, you have an empty classroom. And if you put 100 kids into one classroom instead of 25 kids in 4 classrooms, you could empty 3/4 of the rooms. And then you can sit around and you can have conversations at the school board about what to do about the 75% of the empty classrooms in the city. Just look next door where they're climbing up through the walls and they've got no seat to sit on and there's no room to get in the room. Now, of course, we have made some improvements with regard to class sizes. We're still, though, the largest in the state. And what bugs the you-know-what out of me is that I could watch school board meetings, 24 of them, or whatever it is, 22 a year, twice a month for every month except for August. I could watch 20 or 22 school board meetings a year in the city of Manchester, and I'll never hear a conversation about that. Almost never. But I'll have navel-gazing and inquiry and, as though, we're really trying our best here. I think there's some more wastefulness we need to find. And all these classrooms that, we have all this extra stuff that we don't really need. Are we utilizing things properly? When you've got the biggest classrooms in the state, when your teachers are the least well compensated teachers of the 4 major towns in the state of New Hampshire, when you're spending less on education than the poorest, cheapest, most mealy-mouthed citizen in the whole state of New Hampshire, when your average student spending is lower than the average student spending in the United States is, in a state where we are the 5th or 6th richest state in the union in terms of per capita income, you don't need to be looking around for, arcane and issues about could we possibly, is there something we haven't noticed here, that another penny we could find if we could squeeze 2 classes into half a day and share the room, build a wall down the middle of it. It's all a load of nonsense. The only discussion that the school board members should be having, and they should be having it every month, is how are we doing comparing to where we were? Have we gotten any better? Have we reintroduced remedial classes for our kids who need remedial classes? Do we have a program for gifted and talented kids? Have we got equity in our AP and level 4 classes? Are we doing right by our EL students? Are we doing right by our special needs students? Do we have the services in place that these kids need? Are we paying our staff an adequate wage? We can't get substitutes in the state of New Hampshire, and in the city of Manchester, because you can earn more money working at Dunkin' Donuts than you can being a substitute teacher in the city of Manchester. So we have a lot of work to do. And the nonsense should all stop. And the 14 people, all of them very nice and well-intentioned and etc., sitting around the table in their, I was going to say full concern. I'm sure they're really concerned, and I know that they put in time and effort and all the rest of it. But the bottom line is the bottom line. Manchester should be doing a hell of a lot better than it's doing, and that should be the sole concern of the school board. And instead of bringing in now the joint principals every 2 weeks to sit and answer how many kids graduated from this class, and was there this, what was the number here, and do we do this, and have we looked at that? And last night we had the ridiculous conversation, maybe not ridiculous, but we had a conversation last night about communications, about in the city, in the school board, in the district, about sending out communications to parents. Now, in a normal, reasonable, level-headed, rational thinking town, the usual discussion would be we need to get information out to parents. Communication ought to be better. Parents should better understand their kids, what their kids are doing, what their kids are learning, the whole parental involvement thing, right? There should be communication out so parents know what's going on in the classroom, what's going on in the school district. And yet, we come to Alice through the looking glass, Manchester. The town where, it's like going into one of those hall of mirrors at the penny arcades or in a carnival, where everything is distorted when you look through the mirror. You come into Manchester and it's all distorted mirrors. Because the conversation last night wasn't about how do we get more and better information out to families. It wasn't about, in the case of an alert when there's a problem, how do we get information out to families. No, it was, we've got too much information going out, and who's in charge of it and why it's going out. And of course, in fairness to school board member Jimmy LaHoo, he put his finger right on the topic and called it out because it was unspoken anyway, and that's the disingenuousness of the entire thing. The real issue was the 2 or 3 people on the school board who are suspicious of or dislike the fact that they haven't, or whatever, I don't want to characterize it, but dislike Manchester Proud were unhappy that a message went out on the schools, one of the schools, either by school text or whatever, went out to parents letting them know that there was a Manchester Proud listening night going to be held. I think it was at Memorial back last month or 2 months ago, and that anybody who was interested in having their voices heard with regard to the future of Manchester schools should come and be at the meeting. And that's what they were bothered about. So we spent cycles last night talking about why are we sending this information, who's in charge of the information, why is there too much information going out, people are ignoring it now because they're getting too many messages. Come on, man. It wasn't 10 minutes ago, metaphorically speaking, that people, why isn't the school district communicating more? But because of the political purpose of not liking the idea that a group that is not intent on dismantling the Manchester School District is actually working with the school district to hold meetings to listen to the people and to hear what the public have to say, that became a problem. So, that's the problem with the Hall of Mirrors. And the people, even my friends who are on these boards, the problem is they've gotten so...
Sorry, Jim, that's 5, not 3.
Okay, thanks. The problem with my friends on the school board is, and the board in Alderman too, but on the school board, is they've gotten so used to looking at twisted facts through the twisted mirror of whatever happens in that chamber. That rational, reasonable people who are perfectly likable and well-intentioned, etc., and they walk through, it's like some scene out of a science fiction movie. They walk through some portal into the Manchester chamber of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen or the school board, and all of a sudden, 1 and 1 becomes 10, and water flows uphill, not down, and gravity doesn't work anymore, and common sense goes out the window, and all of a sudden, we have, if it were a hospital, it'd be like some guy gets wheeled in on a gurney, and he's had a heart attack, and he's after having his right arm cut off in a car accident all at the same time, and we have surgeons all looking around because he's got a pimple on the left side of his nose, and we're wondering whether it's going to pop tomorrow or not, and what should we do about the pimple policy? It is ludicrous. The people who lived in Manchester in the past, who never foresaw a time when the city of Manchester would have to own fully the idea that it had the least well-funded school system in the state and that it had the largest class sizes in the state, they would have stood up and said, this is not the city that we envisioned, this is not the city we wanted, this was never intended, we didn't want it to happen, we didn't foresee it happening when we voted for the stupid tax cap, we didn't realize that those people who do not have the best interests of our city at heart, who are not interested in fully funding public education, who don't really want to help the less well-off in our community, that was never our intention to allow that to happen. And please stop talking about all the other things and concentrate on the core issue that's facing the Manchester School District. You can have play all the games you want, but you must deal with this. And I'm fine if the Manchester School District board wants to have meetings every 2 weeks and discuss the 57 things they discuss on their agenda and spend their whole night at it. At the beginning of the meeting, I would like to see the metric be asked, how are we doing with regard to school numbers, with regard to our pupil-teacher ratio, and how are we doing with regard to adequately funding our schools? Let's look at those two measures. And we can have a writing number out over every 2 weeks. Are we getting better or are we not? And then every discussion, all the other items that come up on the agenda should be coloured by those two salient and important facts. But we ignore that because we want to spend, like I like to say, we want to spend time. You don't want to talk about the real problem. Let's, what's that? A Zeppelin over there? Let's look at the shiny object in the distance. Don't look here, nothing to see. Move right along. So I started to say, ladies, the bookmobile, I just want to cover it before we finish. The bookmobile for people who are interested in getting books during the summer. Mondays, we at Livingston Park from 10:30 to 11:30 and Elmwood Gardens Community Centre from 1 to 2. On Wednesdays, it'll be at City Hall Plaza from 10 to 11:30 and at Sheridan Emmett Park over on Beach Street at 1 to 2. And then on Fridays, it'll be at Piscataqua River Park on Precourt Street from 10:30 to 11:30, and then at Massabesic Lake Park on the Londonderry Turnpike from 1 to 2 p.m. on Friday. So Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. The other thing that's important, ladies and gentlemen, that we didn't get to today was the issue of the summer food program. And so there is a program where kids can be fed and are being fed. Free food for kids will be available at various places every day. It's at Elmwood Gardens, the WIC in Manchester, Harriman Park, the Welcome Home, Centre Park, Proud Park, Huntspool, Rock Rimmon, the Adventure Park, Sweeney Park, Kelly Falls Apartments, Maple Street Apartments, Manchester Pal, Beach Street School Park and Beach Hill Apartments. Those are at various times during the day. Go on the website and you'll be able to find those at M&E and NSD. Good luck to everybody. Have a safe and happy summer. Enjoy your kids, enjoy your family, and enjoy what Manchester has to offer. See you all in a week. Good night.